All right, welcome to season two of College Football Primer. I'm Brian McGinty, coming to you live from Cleveland, Ohio. Well, I guess this is not live, it's taped. I'm in a basement in Cleveland, and yeah, super pumped. Um, I want to apologize if the sound is a little rough. We haven't had a lot of time to troubleshoot. Um, there's a story behind the microphone. During our move, we were packing stuff, and I made sure to put the previous mic that I used last season in like a spot that was easy to get to because most of our stuff is in storage, and I can't find it. So I ordered another one after going to like the storage unit and searching high and low for the first mic, and ordered one from Amazon, and that one did not get here. So today I went to Walmart and bought the third microphone. So, this may be the chosen mic. That's my hope. I know the last one like picked up a little too much or may have been a little too professional. So this may be like the perfect fit. So fate has led me to this mic. At the same time, if it is horrible, there are more on the way. So, and there's one or two people who have texted and said like, "Yo, man, like you gonna do that college football primer thing again?" And yeah, you're the reason why I'm sitting on a floor in a basement with a microphone from Walmart on a Monday night, trying to find some time between putting my daughter down and making sure my cousins don't come running up the front door. Uh, and trying to talk about college football. So let's do it. I'm super pumped because it's here. Like they're not wrong. The older you get, the quicker time flies. And all of a sudden, this weekend is Labor Day. And unlike last year where I started the primer at week zero, that just became too confusing. It would be like episode one, week two type of thing. So it's episode one, season two, week one. Let's go. And this college football season had its pseudo kickoff over the weekend with Florida State, Georgia Tech, SMU, Nevada, and other teams playing. And the theme of this year, and in some sense, like this episode, is no one knows what's going to happen. Like we have no idea. Anyone who says they do know doesn't, and that's because there's so much change. There's conference change, there's coaching changes, there's positional changes. Like there's not enough to keep track of, and we just don't know. I mean, there's so much, it's hard to keep track. We just don't know how it's going to play out. And I think the biggest thing that not enough people are talking about because it happened 8 months ago, and I think we'll have one of the biggest impacts is Nick Saban leaving coaching. Like we I mean, it's a Titan. Like I think that's the thing is, you know, the people who go, hey, what was it like to watch Michael Jordan play? Or, what was it like to see Ronaldo play, even though, Ronaldo's still playing. But like a legend was walking the sidelines of Alabama for a decade and a half almost, and he's gone. And not only is he gone, but the national title winning coach from Michigan, Jim Harbaugh, is also gone. He's in the NFL. So, like, I don't think there's ever been a time in history where a legendary coach and then the coach that just won the national title who would go to defend it instead just goes to the NFL. Like, that's unprecedented. So, college football is wide open. It's insanely wide open. And here's a stat that's kind of wild. With Harbaugh leaving and Saban retiring, there are now only three coaches actively in college football who have won a title. Kirby Smart with Georgia, he's won two. Dabo Swinney with Clemson, he's won two. And then Mac Brown, who's with North Carolina, and he won with Texas. And I almost feel like Mac Brown, I mean, this is like kind of a retirement experiment. I don't know if like, if this is like going golfing for Mac Brown. Like no one's gonna care. It's a basketball school, right? So if you don't win a title at North Carolina, then you're fine. So of all the coaches of over like 130 programs in college football, Only three have titles. That's the hole that Nick Saban is leaving college football and leaving in the SEC. Just to give some like statistics to break down like how big of a guy that Nick Saban was. With Alabama, he won six national titles, and then with LSU, he won another. Um, that is the most of any head coach, seven national titles. Um, it's kind of unfair that Alabama head coach Bear Bryant is right behind Nick Saban with six national titles. Then you have to go to Woody Hayes with five, who is Ohio State's legendary coach, and then finally John McKay with USC has four. To put that into further context, Notre Dame has eight national titles as a school. Saban has seven. OU and USC both have seven titles. And then after that, schools like Florida, Texas, Nebraska, Ohio State, Miami, like legendary programs, Michigan, right? They have less national titles than Nick Saban does. Nick Saban, in 28 years as a head football coach, never had a losing season. That's insane. Um, his teams were ranked number one in the AP poll for a total of 109 weeks. That is the most of any college football coach in history. He has beaten nine number one ranked teams in his career. That's the most by any coach in college football history. Here's the stinger. So he Saban beat nine number one ranked teams. No other college football coach has beaten more than four, and he's gone. Like that's wild. Um, I'm like trying to like contextualize some of it. Just keeps coming like at you in waves of like the way that Nick Saban is this legendary coach. And before I get onto like my favorite play call and what made me like really enjoy Nick Saban, because there are a lot of things not to enjoy about Nick Saban. Um, there's something weird where like he's one of the reasons why I think people and like all living organisms on this planet like pass away. Because if he didn't get old, if he didn't have to like see the clock ticking and wonder what he's going to do with the next 10 years of his life or so, because he's 71, um, he would probably be coaching forever. And every year we'd have to worry about Alabama and are they going to win another title? And is Nick Saban going to call in to college football game day and be like, this is why we should be in the playoffs? And just like every single year. And it's just like, at some point, and this is kind of the beauty of life, like it ends. Like it, it runs its course no matter how great you are or what you do. Like even Alexander the Great had to like kick the bucket, right? Like, and Nick Saban like a great oak tree or redwood, so to speak, like has to fall and make room for the little flowers that are blooming around him. And so like we're here now, and it just is weird to see that. And like in my mind, when I think about the title game was Washington versus Michigan. But the real title game in terms of like the play was Michigan versus Alabama and Jim Harbaugh and Nick Saban, and that went down to the wire, and that was a phenomenal game. And there's a weird kind of catch-22 with that game where, on the one hand, that's Nick Saban. I think one of his best coaching jobs was coaching that team to a playoff game. But at the same time, as we talked about last year, that was the best recruiting class in the history of recruiting classes. Like that team, the recruiting class that was on that Alabama team was the best in the history of college football, and he couldn't take them to a title game. But at the same time, a lot of those guys weren't panning out. I think the way their rankings and ratings were having them for a long time after Nick Saban. Sorry, for a long time, like I didn't like Nick Saban. He beat Oklahoma in 2003 with LSU. He left to go to the Miami Dolphins, and he left halfway through the season to take um, the Alabama job, or like near the end of the season. And like that did sit well with me. My whole NFL coach is in like pretty high esteem. Like I think if you're an NFL head coach and you've been around for a while, like you're a certified genius. You're like one of the best to ever do it. Like you can do anything. You can run a company, you can run a military squadron, like you can whatever you need to do, whatever needs to be done, you're gonna be good at it. And Nick Saban couldn't cut it. I don't think he knew how to speak to men, quote unquote. And so when he went back to college and just started tearing it up with these recruiting classes, I'm like, well, yeah, like way to go, dude. Like way to coach quotes the best guys to the title game. But in 2016, when he was playing Clemson, I mean that was like a back and forth affair, and Clemson had Deshaun Watson. It was like a phenomenal quarterback. The game was tied in the fourth quarter, and with I think about 5 minutes left, after scoring a touchdown to tie it because Alabama was behind, Saban kicked an onside kick, and I thought that's a coaching call. Like that's straight, like all right, I'm in all chips, let's go, and they won that game in overtime. And so it was games like that where I'm like, okay, wait, this guy is like really good. I mean, the second one for me, and I think it was 2 years later where he benched Jalen Hurts for Tua, and Tua hadn't played, or sorry, Tua hadn't started a game all year. Um, and to bench the guy who got you there at halftime and put in another quarterback, a much younger quarterback, I believe Tua was a freshman, and then go on and win the game is insane. Um, I love the idea that like he called the press rat poison because they're always complimenting his players and they were getting like their head in the sky and in the clouds and it, you know they're going to miss having this presence around and I don't think good luck to DeBoer through his replacement like there's only I mean as a legend right you're I don't know how you replace a legend you can't right um something that's interesting is the last time someone won title, so pivoting to Jim Harbaugh and bolting for the NFL was Nick Saban in 2003. And another thing is like when I Googled like when was the last time a coach stepped down after winning a title, the first name that came up was Urban Meyer, and he came back. So Florida wins. He's like, oh, I have health issues. Then he comes back. So he stepped down, but he came back to the program. The weird thing is Nick Saban's first coaching job was at the University of Toledo. Urban Meyer was born in Toledo. So just stuff like that I find really interesting. Um, and it's also interesting to me that like Harbaugh is going to go to a Super Bowl with Colin Kaepernick and basically like just leave from Michigan. And like when you're in the NFL, you're doing some amazing things. And this team has been coming on for a while. Like if you look at the record, it's been like they've struggled with Ohio State, they've struggled with their bowl games, but he was 10-3, 10-3, 8-5, 10-3, 9-4. Right? Those are not horrible, right? They're good, but they weren't like super consistent. But the past 3 years, here's the record for Harbaugh. 12-2, 13-1, 12-0. Um, that's pretty amazing. So both those guys are gone, and we have the situation where the conferences are now these behemoths, and we're going to have games where all of a sudden Oregon is going to Michigan and playing in Ann Arbor for a conference game. And if anyone thinks they know how that's going to play out, they're lying. And we saw that this weekend, right? So we've got this situation where these top coaches are gone. We have a situation where you have players who are like entering and leaving during via the transfer portal. Um, that's gone, and then you have this idea that like we're playing teams that we're not used to playing, and that's going to change things up a lot in a way that like no one can anticipate. Um, so I think that's something that's going to be like kind of wild. I also think the idea that the introduction of a 12 team playoff is going to change the way games are coached, not in a way that's going to be great for the viewer. Um, just to give all of y'all a heads up who may not like remember how that's gonna go. Um, it's basically gonna be the five highest ranked teams. I'm sorry, the five highest ranked conference champions. And that doesn't mean like conference title game, like just if you win your conference, but if you're in one of those big five, you know, I guess the two in the Pac-12, but um, you will get a bye. And then 5 through 12 will get um, to host the higher seeds will get to host the playoff game at home. So that's going to be wild. And one of the things that I don't like about that is you're going to have teams like, for example, in the Big Ten who play in the title game, and they're going to have to play an extra game. And especially in the Big Ten, when they had like the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference, usually the team in the Western Conference was just going to get destroyed, right? Um, you were going up against Michigan or Ohio State or Penn State. And so, who's to say that, like, if you know that you're going to probably make it into the playoffs no matter what, why would you not, like, rest your dudes in the conference title game, a game you're probably going to lose, right? I guess you could argue that you'll get a bye, but we've seen situations where, like, teams that are undefeated, right? If they lose the conference title game, but the other team that beat them, like, has two or three losses, which is quite possible, like, maybe they get a better position. So, like, I don't like the fact that these games are going to be in situations where, like, you don't have to play hard all year. I think that's going to be really difficult as the viewer to watch. The other thing that I don't like is, and I've called it like the NFLification of college football. Um, One of them is the 12-team playoff, right? That's very similar to the NFL. You also have um, the 2-minute warning, where instead of the clock stopping, right, they changed this last year on a first down. Um, it's going to keep going until you're under 2 minutes, be it right before halftime or right before the end of the game, much closer to the NFL. You're going to have new this year in-helmet communication with the QB and with the player on defense, just like the NFL. And then with the rise of the transfer portal, that's basically free agency. Like the fact that you have players who can get money and have schools kind of compete head to head of who's getting a bigger salary, and they can leave kind of whenever they want as soon as the transfer portal opens. It's just like musical chairs. I'm if you besides Alabama, I'm trying to phrase this correctly. In the Heisman for the Heisman quarterbacks, all those guys were transfers. So like Bo Nix transfer from Auburn to Oregon. Caleb Williams transfer from Oklahoma to USC. You have Jaden Daniels was a transfer. I believe Jaden Daniels was from Arizona State, and then Michael Penix Jr. was from Indiana. So all these quarterbacks who know that they have talent are just moving around, and it just really is unfortunate that they're not staying at their schools. And it makes just again going back to this idea that no one knows what's going to happen. So it makes it super exciting, but it also makes it the way that they're trying by they, I mean like media organizations are trying to rein in the beast, so to speak, is something that like I do not enjoy a ton. So like one of the things that I think is happening when we look at like the conferences, um, right now you have the Big Ten and you have the SEC, you have the Big 12 and the ACC, and those are kind of the big four. Um, but if you look at the quality of the SEC and the Big Ten, and the Big Ten has 18 teams and the SEC has 16 teams, um, those are the big time programs. And those programs are the ones that like people want to see. So, for example, like why did USC and UCLA and Oregon and Washington bolt for the Big Ten? It's because they know that people want to see Oregon versus Michigan. People want to see Washington versus Penn State. People want to see USC versus Ohio State, right? And it's unfortunate because they act like no one wanted to see the Fighting Illini versus Ohio State. And that's where like the magic happened. Like that's where upsets happened. And like on the one hand, like you'll still have quote unquote upsets, right? Where Ohio State isn't supposed to lose to Oregon, but they're both bringing like money, prestige, um, powerhouse athletic conference. I'm sorry, athletic departments to the game. And when you like, no offense to Indiana and the University of Indiana, but like it's just not the same when they're going up against Michigan, and it's not the same when Northwestern is going up against Penn State, and it's not the same when Maryland's going up against Ohio State. Like it's just it's different, but the thing that is enjoyable about it is like if you go to Ohio State, you probably know someone who went to the University of Indiana, and you probably know someone who went to the University of Iowa. You probably don't know someone who went to the University of Southern California, right? But if you're a TV media outlet, like you don't want to have to pay for your team to go, your broadcast team to go like all the way to Champaign, Illinois and broadcast a game that may be 21-0 by halftime, right? But I think the history and the tradition and the rivalry, like when it comes to like geographic rivalry, is super important, is what like makes college football fun. So like as these conferences become larger and you start getting your Oregons and your Washingtons and your USCs and your Texases and your Oklahomas and your A&Ms and your Floridas, um, this is what I think is going to happen. And this is dovetailing into the NFLification. You're going to get two large conferences for football. This is the trajectory. It's not going to be four where it's the ACC and the Big 12. It's going to be two. And the way I see it is, again, we said at the outset, like the Big Ten has 18 teams and the SEC has 16. FSU, Miami, and Clemson have all said they want out of the ACC. And so if they go to, I'm sorry, yeah, the ACC. If they go to the SEC, that's going to give the SEC 19 teams. And if Notre Dame goes to the Big Ten, that gives the Big Ten 19 teams. And then you have 38 total teams. That's six more than the NFL. That's enough to have your playoff, have your Big Ten versus SEC. Like you can have your bowl games as the playoffs, right? And you don't need to worry about Baylor. You don't need to worry about Texas Tech. You don't need to worry about the University of Arizona. You don't need to worry about trying to think of another school that I'm not trying to. Oh, Kansas State, right? You can have Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Michigan State, Oklahoma, Texas, Alabama, Florida, Florida State, Clemson, right? Tennessee, like run through the whole thing and get a title game with big dogs as opposed to, when it was TCU and Georgia and that game was over at like half. You know what I'm saying? So that's where this is going. And anyone who doesn't know otherwise, like it's going to start with conference title games being defunct. Like there's with the playoff, there's no point in playing those games. And then it's just going to be watered down from there. And again, like Nick Saban called it and when the playoff happened and they started with four and just kind of the last thing that I've said before, like it, and I agree with Nick or Nicholas or Mr. Saban. It should have never been four. There's no reason um, it should even be that much. Like the gap between one and two historically has always been large. It should have just been a play-in game for two and three. That's all it should have been. It keeps the conferences and their title games like it's kind of sacred. It excuse me, allows for if there's three teams that are undefeated, then one can play in, right? But you have enough data by the end of the year. Everyone just throws their hands up and acts like they haven't watched 12 games of college football, and it's just ridiculous. And now the fact that they're expanding it and thinking it's going to be a better product, like I just don't agree. Um, so anyway, that's my rant. We're gonna get to our top 12. Um, I did top 10 last year. We're doing 12 because of the playoff. Right now, it's not like the 12th seed is going to be the non-Big Five power conference team. It's just going to be the top 12 teams. Start with 12, Clemson. And Dabo, I trust. He's been a little down, but I trust Dabo. And then the ACC is going to be pretty nice to him, I think. 11 is Arizona, bringing back uh, quarterback and coach. And I think that's one of the things that when we look at this, is like I ask myself, are you bringing back your quarterback from last year and you're bringing back your coach? And if you are, then you get high marks. So Arizona's doing that. They destroyed OU in the Alamo Bowl last year, and I think they're going to do pretty well this year in the Big 12. 10 is Alabama, just because they've got the money and the power and the prestige, and you know, Alabama doesn't need to do what everyone else does. They're like the New York Yankees. Like they just get the benefit of the doubt. New coach, we'll see what he can do, but they've got the guys, they've got the returning quarterback, um, and in Milrow, and it should be good. Same thing with Utah, returning coach in Whittingham and returning quarterback Cam Rising, even in play last year. They should be really, really good in the Big 12. Number 8, LSU, new quarterback, same coach. Brian Kelly is one of the top coaches in the college football ranks. I think they're going to do good and benefit, excuse me, do well, and they're going to benefit from Nick Saban being gone. 7, Penn State, returning quarterback, returning coach. 6, and this is kind of the example of no one knows what's going to happen. Florida State. I have not moved them. I released these rankings on Friday, and yeah, I think look, DJ Ulalele. I think the G's silent. Guy's got problems, man. Like, there's a reason why this is a third school. There's a reason why Dabo Sweeney couldn't get him to do what he needed him to do. There's a reason why he left Oregon State, even though he's fine at Oregon State. Um, that guy did not look, he's never looked like he can be aggressive and throw guys open. And I think after the stomping from Georgia that Mike Norvell got, who I think is a phenomenal coach, I think he was just like, oh, we got to get a five-star guy from the portal. And they got him, but he doesn't play like a five-star. And one of the things that sits with me from like earlier this season or in the preseason with the NFL is one of the players talked about how he hates how like reporters and people in the front office of NFL organizations talk about like what round he was drafted in. It's like a fifth round pick. And he's like, dude, I like it's like an albatross. Like it follows me wherever I go, and I'm always just a fifth round pick despite how I play on the field. And it like makes a lot of sense where like a first round pick is was like, oh, it was the team. Like that's the reason why this first round pick didn't live up to his potential, not the first round pick. But if you're like a fifth round pick, like you're the reason why you didn't live up to your potential. You're a fifth rounder. It's not the team's fault. Like you have to grind it out even more. So um I think that's the situation with DJ and Florida State is they just were like, oh, he's a five-star caliber guy. We should bring him in. I mean, he's not working out. 5, Oregon, same coach, new quarterback, Dylan Gabriel. That's going to be pretty good. 4, Missouri, same coach, same quarterback. They could be a dark horse to win the SEC. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. A dark horse to go to the SEC title game. 3, Ohio State. I like the new quarterback, Will Howard. Um, if Ryan Day does not make a playoff game, and if he doesn't beat Michigan, he's fired. There's a $20 million roster. They have gone out and loaded up. This is going to be a down year for Michigan. I was going to say the only team they got to worry about is Penn State, but they got to worry about Oregon. But Ohio State, if they don't pull it together this year, Ryan Day is gone. Two, my heart pains me to say this. Texas is two. Quinn Ewers is back. Sarkisian is back. That roster and that culture and everything that comes with like being SEC ready, I think they've got it. Like I really like Quinn Ewers. I think he does a really good job. I like Sark. That is a dangerous Texas team. Um, so I had them as number two, and number one is Georgia, and they should be, despite their loss against Bama in the SEC title game, they should be going for their fourth national title in a row. But instead, they're going for three out of four. So 12 Clemson, 11 Arizona, 10 Alabama, 9 Utah, 8 LSU, 7 Penn State, 6 Florida State, which will change, 5 Oregon, 4 Missouri, 3 Ohio State, 2 Texas, 1 Georgia. Um, let's get to this upcoming week and kind of look, um this is going to be a situation, and like I went back and listened to my podcast from last year, is as the season goes along, like you get to know like, oh, okay, this team is actually decent, or oh, this team stinks, or oh, like Florida State has a problem. um, and right now we're in the fog of war. I mean, you go back and watch College Game Day in Dublin, and everyone from Nick Saban to Pat McAfee to Kirk Herbstreit is just like, oh, Florida State's gonna roll. Florida State's gonna roll. And Florida State, by the way, they lost by like a field goal in the last few seconds. It felt like they got destroyed. Like it really did. But I mean, that Georgia Tech kicker, like, he kicked a 61-yard field goal. I mean, that's insane. That used to be an NFL record. Now it's just dudes in college are kicking 61 yarders like it's no problem. He had room on that too. So I don't think Florida State is in a huge amount of trouble, but no one saw that coming. No one saw Nevada being up on SMU at halftime. Nobody saw New Mexico losing to South Dakota after being up 21 points in the fourth quarter. New Mexico paid the privilege to have their butts handed to them. They paid $36,000 to South Dakota to have them come in there and beat them. No one saw that coming. So these picks are kind of, you know, these should be good matchups, but no one really knows. And again, when we talk about like why do you do this, Brian? Like what's your deal? Why are you talking into a microphone in a basement in Cleveland? Because like 10 people are listening. Um, Number one, there's going to be a ton of football, especially like they're going to spread it out over a few days this weekend. But as we get going, like there's a ton of games, and I honestly believe that like each, I don't want to say channel, but like outlet is peddling their narrative and their story. And just because it's a big team doesn't mean it's a big game, or as I should say, like a good game. I'm trying to like pick out good games that you should watch and tune in for. And then secondly, the subtext of this is also like, I want you to be able to sit down at 11 o'clock Central Time and watch football all day and like know like, okay, like I know this game's gonna be good, and then at 3 o'clock this game's gonna be good, and then at 7 o'clock this game's gonna be good, and then at 9 o'clock, like if you can sit down and I can schedule like 12 hours of football, then I've done my job. Um, and then finally, like, I do like best bet. I do like looking at, hey, this is too high, this is too low. Um, that's something that as like a history guy, I'm like a huge fan of, is being able to digest some of that information. So, with that in mind, let's go to our games. I'll start with the bottom. Um, best bet is going to be an odd duck, and that's going to be the University of Connecticut Huskies at Maryland at noon Eastern Standard Time. I'm picking UConn to cover the 20-point spread. They're 20-point underdogs at Maryland. Um, I basically went in and was just like, what is the largest spread in like one of the big conferences and like pick it because excuse me, like as you watch the NFL and the preseason that's wrapping up, like I hate to sound like an old dude, but it used to be like game two of the NFL preseason when there were four preseason games and not three like there is now. You'd see the starters come out and they'd go for like a drive, maybe a quarter if it were, game two. Game three, it would be like a half, right? And then game four, it would be like three quarters. Like they would work their way into it. Like it would be like a drive, a quarter, a half, something like that. Um, and now like that doesn't even happen. I tuned into the Giants Jets game to be like, okay, cool. I'll see Daniel Jones, who was like injury prone last year, who has like a new rookie wide receiver who could be amazing, who has new like more or less offensive line, who has new running back. I'm gonna see this guy play the last preseason game 2 weeks before the season starts. No, wrong. Like they don't play. Aaron Rodgers got injured the first game last year. He has not played any preseason games. So he has not played football in a year, like competitive football. Now we can talk about the scrimmages, but dude, a scrimmage is a scrimmage. So my point, and you saw it with Nevada and SMU, you saw it with Florida State and Georgia Tech, you saw it with New Mexico and South Dakota. Nobody is ready. Nobody is ready to go. Okay? Nobody is ready to go. Nick Saban's team would be ready to go, but he's gone. So UConn at Maryland. The final thing is I have fond memories of going up Chicago with my meeting some buddies up there, and we go out into their little like courtyard or whatever, and they bring a TV, and I'm like, dude, what are we doing sitting outside? Like, it's gonna be hot, and they're like, no, it's gonna be like 77 degrees. And I was like, what? I mean, I'm coming from Texas. And the game that was on, I was like, this is amazing. Like, and at the time it was probably like 65, heat up, quote unquote, to 77. The game that was on was Maryland hosting Texas, and Texas lost. And so I was like, this is the greatest day ever. But yeah, like you never know what's going to happen game one. So take UConn to cover. Jim Mora, who's a former NFL head coach, right? He's UConn's coach, and Maryland does not have a Tagovailoa anymore. So at quarterback, so we have kind of these ingredients of like I think with the transfer portal and an NFL coach and this UConn program that's trying to get back into it, I think it's going to be a pretty good game, and I think they're going to cover. Best nightcap. This is one of the other sad parts of like the Big 12 essentially dissolving, and going to the Big 10 is we're going to lose Pac-12 after dark. Like it's Stanford, TCU visiting Stanford, but Stanford's now an ACC team. That is going to be on Friday at 10:30. That's your nightcap, 10:30 Eastern. What's wild is TCU went 5-7 last year. After being in the national title game, they went 5-7. They finished 10th in the Big 12. To make it worse, Stanford was 3-9, and they lost every single home game last year. Oh, that's bad. But I think that's why this game is going to be really interesting. Um, it's it lives in the spirit of Pac-12 After Dark. It's a great way to start. Again, college football is going to start on Thursday. So a really great way to kick off your Labor Day weekend is to throw TCU at Stanford on. I think that should be at least a decent game. TCU is favored by about 10. All right. Most intriguing, USC, LSU, Sunday night, 7:30, Las Vegas. Two new quarterbacks for both programs. Same coaches. Lincoln Riley at USC, Brian Kelly at LSU. Um, LSU loses a Heisman winning quarterback in Jaden Daniels. USC loses a Heisman winning quarterback in Caleb Williams. Um, USC has definitely utilized the transfer portal, and their defense should be better. I don't believe it will be better. I will be hate watching this, but it will be fascinating to see like two very good offensively minded coaches, which Lincoln Riley definitely is that, go against each other with these two quarterbacks. USC's got DeAnton Lynn, and then LSU has Garrett Nussmeier, and it's going to be interesting to see like how well those guys perform. And those are two big programs, right? Like, again, that's a Big Ten SEC matchup. It's weird with USC, and yeah, I think that's going to be like a really intriguing game to see like if Lincoln Riley can do something because he hasn't had a big game that he's won in a long, long time. People thought he was going to be winning Pac-12 titles, and he hasn't won a single one. I don't, he hasn't won a single one, yeah, because he lost to Utah his first year. So he hasn't won a single one. I think he's just going to get an offensive coordinator job in the NFL. I think Brian Kelly's a great coach. I've said that before. Um, you know, they lost to Florida State last year at in the same game, so to speak, Sunday night, and that Florida State team went on and almost like went undefeated essentially like until their quarterback went out. So yeah, I think that's going to be a great game. It's going to be very intriguing to see how those guys, those head coaches, especially in those programs, do in their first game in a neutral site. Okay, one that I'm really excited about. We're like working our way up. We got two more. Backyard Brawl. Number 19 Miami versus Florida. They're in the swamp. So Miami is going up the road to Gainesville. That's at 3:30 on Saturday. Um, One of my fondest memories was watching this game growing up. Those dudes hit harder in this game. Like the hits in this game when I was growing up, and in partly because they all knew each other from high school, were just huge. Like it was insane. I remember Sean Taylor before he went to the NFL and just like lighting dudes up. One another fond memory was being in college my freshman year, like waiting for a phone call, see if I was gonna get into like the Spirit Squad at Oklahoma, and that game was on, and it was a great game, and it's always a low scoring game, and it's always a tough game. And keep in mind that this is going to be Florida in August at 3:30 in the afternoon. This is going to be a hot game. No one has practiced. Again, going to this point of like, I don't think people practice the way they used to. No one's going to be used to this. Um, this is the first time Miami is going to the swamp since 2008. Pretty sure the last time they played each other was 2016. So it's been a long time since we've seen this game, an SEC versus ACC bout, which is it should be phenomenal. Um, Miami leads the overall series just by two games. It's 29 and 27. And here's some things that I find like really interesting when we look at the coaches. So Mario Cristobal, who left Oregon, and I believe he won the Rose Bowl the year he left Oregon. Like he was about to just like run the table at Oregon. Like he had that thing humming. He left to go to his alma mater, Miami, and like turn them around. In the past two seasons, he is 12 and 13. Like this is a program that Heather Dinich and Paul Feinbaum of the ESPN ilk are like, you know what? I think the best team in the ACC is going to be. I think it's Miami. I think the Crystal Ball. Blah blah. Here's another thing. This is why I like I made this podcast is those clowns. Like it's sidebar. Brian, why are you talking? Um, Colin Cowherd. If Colin Cowherd can go for 3 hours, I can go for like an hour, right? If that guy can just talk, that guy has no idea what he's talking about. So that's why I'm here. But stuff like this, where the Paul Feinbaums of the world come out and say, "Oh, I think Miami." Okay, explain that record. Explain this. This is what's blowing my mind. Cristobal's overall coaching record is 74 and 73. How do you? That's not good. That's not. That is not good. That's really bad. And yet, like everyone's got Miami kind of riding high. They're number 19 in the country. They're favored in this game by 2.5. Um, Billy Napier, the coach at Florida, same situation in 2 seasons. So both these guys have been there for 2 seasons, right? Their respective schools. Napier is 11 and 14. Um, this he's on the hot seat and he may get let go after this year if he can't put something together. And this is after Florida has one of the hardest schedules in the country. And since Urban Meyer left in 2010, it's been a rough go for Florida. Um, I think Will Muschamp was pretty good, but not great. That's why he's gone. So you have Will Muschamp, then Jim L. McElwain. I always get that wrong. McElwain. And then Dan Mullen and Napier. Now I'm just going to read the records of Urban Meyer, 65 wins and 15 losses. Muschamp, 28 wins and 21 losses. McElwain, 22 wins and 12 losses. That's pretty good. But he's gone, right? Dan Mullen, 34 and 15. And then Napier, 11 and 14. Like, this is trouble, Like, even if you do a little bit better than 500, he's gone. And the fact that, like, you are at a prestigious institution like the University of Florida, which academically is the best institution in Florida, it's a public ivy in some sense. In a hotbed like that, dude, I don't know why he's not gone, but it's gonna be very interesting to watch those two head coaches, those relatively mediocre head coaches, go head to head at 3:30 in the swamp, in the heat, in August, game one. Let's go. Best backyard brawl. That should be really good. And finally, best game. Number 7, Notre Dame at College Station against number 20, Texas A&M. Texas A&M is a 3-point underdog. That's at 7:30 on Saturday. Um, I mean, I think a lot of people have Notre Dame taking that 12 spot since they're an independent in the playoff. Um, they lost their quarterback last year. They keep a very young coach at the helm, and Texas A&M has a new head coach from Duke, and it's going to be really fascinating to see kind of how this game goes, especially when you talk about how hot it's going to be. It's going to kick off at 6:30 in Texas, and it's going to be at least 110 degrees on the field. Those guys are coming from the Midwest at Notre Dame and South Bend all the way down to hot heat stroke Texas in August, and it's going to be like rough when 100,000. I don't know how drunk the Aggies get, but Aggie fans start yelling at these Notre Dame players who probably haven't been practicing in the heat very much, and it's get set go. Um, and so it's going to be prime time in SEC land, so it's going to be fascinating to watch that game play out. And if look, A&M, they need a big win. Like this program is desperate to cling on to something. Um, they're desperate to go back to the Johnny Manziel era. I mean, you might as well call like their program the it's a little too strong to say the house that Manziel built, but like that's what they want to be, and it happened once. They got lightning in a bottle, and it'll be interesting to see what that place is like at night against Notre Dame. So that should be a really good game. Again, Notre Dame's favored by 3. Yes, not ESPN. The ESPN predictor has Notre Dame winning that game by 58%. So there's a 58% chance to win. Again, no one knows what's going to happen. So your day on we start with Friday, right? We start with TCU visiting Stanford at 10:30 Eastern on Friday. Wake up, little hungover. Saturday morning, flip on UConn at Maryland at 12 o'clock on, I believe, FS1. And then you'll go into Florida and Miami at 3:30 on ABC, and then you'll end the day with Notre Dame at Texas A&M, followed by Sunday night phenomenal game with USC and LSU. So if you made it and were listening, I appreciate it. I'll try to get things a little better as the mic situation clears up and things get settled here. But I miss everyone back home and have a great Labor Day weekend.